March 17, 1943. Berlin. The folder hit the desk like a hammer. Paper shook. Coffee spilled. Admiral Ernst Falkenhorst froze. His hand hovered over the stain. Reports lay ruined, but the words still burned from the page. Impossible. Could it be true? Could the Americans really build a bomber every hour? The office was silent. Outside, the landward canal glimmered in the cold. 24 years earlier, the body of Rosa Luxemburg had been dumped in those waters. Now the city carried another secret, one just as dangerous. Falkenhorst was chief of German military intelligence. In his trembling hands, he held numbers that shattered everything the Reich believed. One bomber. Every 60 minutes. A B-24 heavy bomber. A machine of war weighing 18 tons. More than 1.5 million individual parts. Over 400,000 rivets. 4 engines. 2 bomb bays. 30,000 components. And the Americans claimed they were rolling them out faster than Germany could build a simple truck. How could that be real? Major Otto Reinhardt stood at attention. He had checked the intelligence 3 times. Each time the numbers returned the same. It wasn't rumor from a single spy. It wasn't propaganda from a captured agent. It was cross-confirmed from Mexico, Spain, Sweden, even Turkey. Too many voices to ignore. And yet, how could anyone believe it? Falkenhorst whispered almost to himself. If this is true, then the war is already lost. But could he dare speak those words aloud? 2 years earlier the collapse had begun. In 1941, a German attaché in Washington sent reports. American aircraft production was climbing toward 2,000 planes per month. 2,000. What did Hermann Göring do? He laughed. He told Hitler the Americans were bluffing. He said they were only good at building refrigerators and razor blades. He mocked their factories, their democracy, their mongrel population. Their Jews made them weak. Their women made them soft. Their diversity made them corrupt. That was the doctrine. That was the myth. And myths are easier to believe than numbers. But numbers don't vanish. By early 1943 the reports grew louder. Mexican businessmen spoke of miracles in Detroit. Spanish diplomats heard whispers at receptions. Swedish engineers returned from tours with eyes wide. Even letters from American workers to families in neutral nations carried the same shocking refrain. The Willow Run plant. The factory that seemed more myth than machine. In Mexico City, an oil executive drank too much at a reception. He described clouds forming inside the vast roof. He spoke of rivers of sub-assemblies converging into bombers. Wings from one direction. Fuselages from another. Tails from a third. At the end, a bomber ready to fly. His words were memorized by a German agent posing as an Argentine trader. Within days they reached Berlin. In Madrid, Colonel José Calderón, a Spanish attaché, pressed for details with quiet persistence. He heard from Charles Sorensen himself, Ford's production genius. Sorensen had sketched the system in one night. He broke the bomber into 60,000 steps. Each worker trained in days, not months. Women, teenagers, even black workers placed rivets with precision. It wasn't chaos. It was order. Ruthless, mechanical order. In Stockholm, a Swedish engineer walked the lines and could hardly believe his eyes. He returned with tales of specialized tools, thousands of them, each designed for one task. Capital investment beyond Europe's comprehension. Hundreds of millions poured into a single plant. Who could compete with that? From Turkey, merchants whispered of aluminum shipments so vast they dwarfed German supply. From Switzerland, bankers spoke of credits flowing like rivers into American industry. Each report added another stone to the pile. 17 different sources, all pointing the same way. Could they all be wrong? Could they all be deceived? Reinhardt reported to Falkenhorst with grim clarity. Herr Admiral, if these numbers are correct, and I believe they are, then Germany has already lost. It is now only a matter of mathematics and time. But mathematics meant little in Berlin. Truth was dangerous. To speak it was defeatism. To present it was treason. And treason meant death. So Göring continued to laugh. Hitler continued to sneer. Americans build cars, he said. Not bombers. Their factories are not temples of discipline. They are chaos. They cannot achieve what we have taken years to master. But chaos was an illusion. The real illusion lay inside the Reich itself. Imagine the scene. A smoky office in Berlin. Reports stacked high. Photographs waiting to be shown. Shipping manifests, worker counts, aluminum ledgers. All the pieces of the puzzle. All ignored. Why? Because ideology blinded them. Because belief mattered more than fact. Because to accept the truth was to accept the war was unwinnable. And so the files grew dusty. The folders piled higher. The spies did their jobs. The agents risked their lives. The engineers, the businessmen, the diplomats, they all spoke truth. And still the truth was drowned. What happens when a regime builds its power on lies? What happens when reality doesn't bend to myth? In the end, one bomber rolled out every hour. Every hour. And Germany's disbelief became its death sentence. Mexico City. February 1943. A reception hall glowing with chandeliers. Laughter mixing with cigar smoke. German agents mingled among businessmen, merchants, diplomats. At a corner table, an American oil executive named Harold Morrison loosened his tie. The tequila had worked. His guard was down. He leaned forward. His words spilled out. "Gentlemen, I've just returned from Detroit. From a factory you wouldn't believe. A mile long. So vast that clouds form inside. Sometimes it rains indoors." A German agent posing as an Argentine trader pretended to smile politely. But his ears burned. He memorized every word. Morrison kept going. 42,000 workers. Women. Negro women. Teenagers. All of them building bombers. The most complex machine in history. And they make it look like child's play. Could it be true? Could factory novices, mothers, farmers' daughters, young boys, really build heavy bombers? Morrison grabbed a napkin. He sketched rough shapes. Wings arriving from one side. Fuselages from another. Tail assemblies from a third. They meet like rivers flowing into the sea. At the end of the line? A finished bomber. Rolling out every hour. Every hour. The German agent's heart pounded. He would carry these words back to Berlin. But would anyone believe them? Spain. Madrid, March 1943. A reception at the Argentine embassy. Colonel José Calderón, Spain's military attaché in Washington, spoke with Charles Sorensen, the man Ford called Cast Iron Charlie, the architect of Willow Run. Sorensen spoke freely, thinking Calderón was only a curious engineer. "I watched Consolidated build bombers in San Diego," Sorensen said. "Each one different. Each one taking 180,000 man-hours. Chaos. Waste." He smiled. "I knew we could do better. We would build planes the way we build cars. Not workers swarming over a stationary machine. But the machine moving past workers. Step by step. Task by task. Perfection through repetition. Could it be that simple? Was the secret not magic, not miracles, but organization?" Calderón pressed for details. Sorensen gave them. An apprentice school training 8,000 workers each week. 40% of the workforce women. Smaller hands for tighter spaces. More patience for repetitive work. 16-year-olds handling logistics. Black workers running advanced machines. What would Hitler have said hearing this? That women, teenagers, minorities could outproduce the master race? Sweden. March 1943. Engineer Eric Lundberg toured the factory. He returned home dazed. His report was blunt. Efficiency that defies European understanding. 1,600 specialized machine tools, many for single operations. Capital investment of at least $200 million. Perhaps more. 200 million. For one plant. Could Germany even dream of such spending? Switzerland. A banker whispered about American loans. Money flowed like a river into Detroit. Neutral channels carried the news back to Berlin. Turkey. Merchants spoke of aluminum shipments so large they dwarfed the Reich's entire monthly supply. How could a single plant consume more than a nation? By April 1943, German intelligence had assembled 17 independent reports. Different sources. Different routes. Same numbers. Willow Run was producing more heavy bombers in a month than Germany in a year. 17 sources. Could they all be wrong? Could they all be deceived by propaganda? Rear Admiral Karl Ritter, head of air intelligence, studied the data for weeks. He had lived in America once. He had seen skyscrapers rise in 2 years. He had seen the Chrysler Building touch the clouds. He told his colleagues, if Americans can build towers in months, why doubt they can build bombers in hours? But who in Berlin would listen? Who dared bring such heresy to Göring? To Hitler? One thing was clear. The spies had done their job. The agents had gathered the truth. The problem wasn't collection. It was belief. Imagine the frustration. Reports flooding in. Pages full of numbers, diagrams, maps, shipping manifests. All confirming the same thing. Yet each time the files reached the top, the answer came back the same. Impossible. But was it really impossible? Or was it inevitable? The truth was now undeniable. A bomber every hour. The skies would soon darken. And still in Berlin the laughter continued. Berlin. Spring 1943. The evidence was ready. 17 sources. Reports stacked high. Photographs. Shipping manifests. Worker counts. Aluminum ledgers. All pointed to one reality. The Americans were producing bombers at a pace beyond imagination. Admiral Falkenhorst carried the file himself. He entered the vast halls of Hall, Hermann Göring's hunting estate. Marble floors. Stuffed animals. Gold trim. A palace of decadence in the middle of war. Göring sat heavy in his chair. He weighed nearly 300 pounds now. His uniform strained at the buttons. His hand clutched a jeweled baton. Falkenhorst spread the evidence on the table. Photographs of assembly lines stretching to infinity. Reports from Mexico. Diagrams from Sweden. Statements from Spanish diplomats. Each piece a dagger aimed at the Reich's illusions. Herr Reichsmarschall, Falkenhorst began carefully. We have confirmation from 17 independent sources. The Willow Run plant is producing one B-24 Liberator every hour. They have maintained this pace since January. Göring picked up a photograph. It showed rows of half-built bombers rolling through a mile-long factory. Workers swarming around them. A clock visible on the wall. Proof of the hour-by-hour pace. His lip curled. Do you take me for a fool, Admiral? He tossed the photograph aside. These are wooden mock-ups. Clever propaganda. The Americans want us to believe they can build aircraft like sausages. Rubbish. Falkenhorst pulled out more documents. Aluminum manifests. Herr Reichsmarschall, they consume 16 million pounds of aluminum each month. That is more than our entire Reich produces. Göring laughed. A harsh mocking laugh. And where do they find this aluminum? From their women? From their Negro workers? From their Jews? He slammed the table. No, Admiral. You have been deceived. The Americans are weak. Their democracy makes them inefficient. Their mongrel population makes them incapable of such feats. The words echoed in the hall. Arrogance louder than reason. But Göring was not the only one. Days later, Falkenhorst was summoned to the Wolf's Lair. Hitler's headquarters. He entered the room where maps of the Eastern Front covered the walls. Generals leaned over tables. Pencils scratched. Operation Citadel, the great offensive at Kursk, was being planned. Hitler listened impatiently as Falkenhorst presented the intelligence. Mein Führer, he said cautiously, if the Americans produce 1,400 B-24s each month, plus equal numbers of B-17s, plus their fighters, plus British output, our defenses will soon be overwhelmed. Hitler's eyes flashed. His voice cut sharp. Nonsense. The Americans are capable of mass production of toys, of refrigerators, of cars. But bombers? Precision machines? Impossible. When it took us 6 years to prepare for war, you expect me to believe they achieved this in 16 months? Absurd. General Alfred Jodl studied the numbers quietly. He did his own calculation. Even if only a quarter were true, the implications were disastrous. He began to speak. Mein Führer, if we accept even. False? Hitler snapped. His fist slammed the map table. These figures are false. Propaganda designed to frighten us. The Americans cannot do in months what we took years to master. The room fell silent. Ministers exchanged nervous glances. No one dared argue further. To question the Führer was to invite death. But truth has a way of lingering. Secretly, Admiral Falkenhorst had obtained film. Smuggled from Switzerland. 5 minutes of Willow Run in full operation. A camera moved along the assembly line. Bombers in every stage of completion. Men and women working with relentless precision. A clock visible on the wall confirmed the pace. Falkenhorst watched with his deputy. The younger man whispered, "Mein Gott. It's true." Falkenhorst nodded slowly. Then without a word he lit a match. He burned the film reel in his office. The smoke curled upward. "We cannot show this. They will accuse us of forgery. Or treason. What happens when truth itself becomes poison? What happens when reality, undeniable, must be destroyed to preserve ideology?" By late 1943, more photographs arrived. Spanish diplomats captured aerial images of Willow Run. Analysts studied parking lots filled with 12,000 cars, proof of 3-shift operations. They counted nearly 50 bombers ready for delivery at the airfield. They traced rail lines feeding endless materials into the factory. The conclusion was clear. Production rates matched the reports. Yet when Göring was shown the images, he sneered again. Clever manipulation. Scale models. Tricks of light. The Americans want us to tremble. I will not. Denial had become a shield. But shields of arrogance cannot stop bombs. Winter 1943. The reports kept coming. Numbers stacked higher. Photographs piled deeper. Intercepts confirmed again and again. But what use is truth if no one dares believe it? Inside the Reich, silence ruled. Speak of American capacity and you risked your life. Doubt the Führer and you signed your own death warrant. Dr. Albert Speer, the armaments minister, saw the reports. He understood machines. He understood production. He read the figures in private. His diary trembled with despair. If these numbers are even half correct, we face not defeat but annihilation. But he told no one. Why? Because who dares tell Hitler the war is already lost? Dr. Otto Ohlendorf, economist and SS officer, studied captured American economic data. His conclusion? The numbers were not exaggeration. They were mathematics. By June 1944, the Americans alone could build enough bombers to drop Germany's entire Blitz tonnage on London, every single day. Can you imagine that? Every day the fire of an entire campaign unleashed at will. Who could withstand such a storm? Yet reports continued to be dismissed. The Reich still built bombers when it needed fighters. It poured resources into wonder weapons instead of air defenses. Why? Because to plan for reality meant admitting weakness. And weakness was forbidden. Then came February 1944. The Americans called it Big Week. Operation Argument. Over 1,000 heavy bombers roared across the skies. For 6 days, wave after wave struck at German aircraft factories. They dropped more explosives in 1 week than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Imagine being a German officer looking up at the sky, seeing more enemy bombers in one formation than you had fighters in your entire command. Would you still call it propaganda? Adolf Galland, a Luftwaffe ace, told Göring directly, "Herr Reichsmarschall, I counted over 800 bombers in one formation. And these were not mock-ups. They were real planes. Dropping real bombs. Burning real cities. Could denial survive that?" And then June 6, 1944. D-Day. The greatest armada of men and machines the world had ever seen. But above it, an even greater force. Over 11,000 Allied aircraft filled the skies. Bombers. Fighters. Transports. The Luftwaffe could muster fewer than 300 to resist. 300 against 11,000. What chance did they have? What chance did the Reich have? Field Marshal Hugo Sperl sent a desperate message to Berlin. The enemy's aerial superiority is absolute. Our intelligence was correct. We were not deceived by the Americans. We deceived ourselves. At Willow Run, the numbers had reached their peak. April 1944. In just 1 month, workers produced 453 bombers in 468 hours. Do the math. One bomber every 63 minutes. A pace that never seemed real until the sky over Europe proved it with thunder. The factory itself was an empire under one roof. 42,000 workers. 11,000 women. Nearly 4,000 African Americans. Over 1,000 disabled workers. Each group dismissed as inferior by Nazi ideology. Yet they built the machines that crushed the Reich. Doesn't history sting with irony? The so-called weaker races outproduced the so-called master race by orders of magnitude. And inside Germany? Silence turned to whispers. Whispers to fear. The truth was undeniable now. Bombers swarmed overhead daily. Cities crumbled. Rail lines shattered. Oil refineries burned. Wasn't this exactly what the reports had warned? But it was too late. The truth, ignored for 2 years, came crashing down with every raid. Could Germany have chosen differently if it had believed its own spies? Could millions of lives have been saved? After the war, survivors admitted it openly. One officer confessed, "The tragedy was not that we lacked intelligence. We were drowning in it. The tragedy was that no one dared believe it." And so, by refusing to face reality, the Reich sealed its fate. A bomber every hour. A sky filled with steel. A war lost not only on the battlefield, but in the minds of leaders too arrogant to accept the truth. By 1945, the truth could no longer be hidden. Germany lay in ruins. Cities turned to ash. Railways twisted like broken bones. Fuel supplies evaporated under constant bombing. Everywhere the sky belonged to the Allies. And at the heart of it all, Willow Run kept rolling forward. The numbers stunned even America's own allies. Between 1942 and 1945, Willow Run alone built 8,685 B-24 bombers. At peak, the plant produced 650 each month. Across the nation, American factories together produced more than 18,000 Liberators, 12,000 Flying Fortresses, and tens of thousands of fighters. Think of it. In the time it took Germany to produce a single fighter, the United States built entire squadrons of bombers. How could any regime hope to stand against that? After the surrender, German officers finally admitted what they had known deep down. At Nuremberg, Walter Schellenberg testified, "We knew the truth by early 1943. Every professional intelligence officer understood the numbers were accurate. But to say them aloud was to invite death for defeatism." Hans Bernd-Gisevius, another intelligence officer, wrote later, "The tragedy was not a lack of intelligence. We had too much intelligence. But leadership refused to believe it because it contradicted ideology. Isn't that the most dangerous enemy of all? Not ignorance but arrogance?" The cost of denial was measured in lives. Millions lost across Europe. Battles fought with no chance of victory. Cities bombed to rubble while leaders still mocked American production as propaganda. How many could have been saved if truth had been accepted sooner? Even Albert Speer, Hitler's own armaments minister, admitted under interrogation, "If the Willow Run numbers were even half true, we faced annihilation. But I could not speak it. To accept the truth meant death at Hitler's hand." What does it say about a regime when its smartest men would rather watch their nation collapse than risk telling the leader the truth? Meanwhile in America, the work continued without pause. Rosie the Riveter became a symbol. Women who had never worked in factories before now held rivet guns, welding torches, and blueprints. African Americans, long excluded from industry, now stood at assembly lines building machines that changed history. Disabled workers proved that determination could outproduce any prejudice. Isn't it ironic? The Nazis preached that diversity was weakness, while democracy turned that diversity into unstoppable strength. By 1944, the cost per bomber had dropped from $238,000 to $137,000. Efficiency soared. Training schools produced 8,000 new workers every week. What nation could compete with that? The Reich still clung to its myths, but the math had already won. After the war, historians looked back in disbelief. One factory consumed more electricity than entire German cities. One assembly line, a mile long, built more aircraft in a month than Germany did in a year. And yet, for years Nazi leaders laughed at the reports. They laughed, until the bombers appeared over Berlin. A final German intelligence report, dated April 20, 1945, Hitler's last birthday, summed it up with chilling honesty. We reported this truth 2 years ago. We were not believed. Germany dies not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of wisdom to believe intelligence that contradicted what we wished to be true. Can words be more damning? Think of the irony. German spies had done their jobs well. They gathered the facts. They traced the aluminum shipments. They counted the workers. They sketched the mile-long factory floor. They even obtained film of the assembly line in motion. Yet all of it was dismissed as lies. What destroyed the Reich faster, American bombs or German arrogance? At the dedication of the Yankee Air Museum in 1985, Roswell Monroe, one of the real Rosie the Riveters, met former Luftwaffe pilot Hans Rudel. Rudel asked her, "How did you build so many planes so fast?" Monroe smiled. "Honey, we just went to work every day. Nothing fancy. Just punch in, build bombers, punch out. Democracy isn't complicated. It's just free people doing their best." And Rudel, who had once flown against the very bombers she built, answered with words heavy with history. "We were told democracy made you weak. We were told diversity made you inefficient. We were told lies. And those lies killed millions." In the ruins of Berlin, American officers found the last intelligence file on Willow Run. It carried a final warning: reality does not bend to ideology. Mathematics does not yield to myth. Truth ignored becomes tragedy. That was the ultimate verdict. The Reich did not fall only to bombs or bullets. It fell because its leaders refused to believe the truth when it was handed to them. What greater warning could history give us today? History is filled with battles, strategies, and generals. But sometimes the most decisive weapon is not a gun, not a tank, not even a bomber. Sometimes it is the simple truth. And in the case of Nazi Germany, truth itself was the weapon they refused to use. Willow Run wasn't just a factory. It was a miracle of organization. A mile-long assembly line that turned parts into power, steel into strategy, and workers into warriors without ever leaving the ground. It was proof that democracy, when challenged, could outproduce tyranny. Proof that free people, united by purpose, could overwhelm even the fiercest dictatorship. Isn't that a lesson we should never forget? The Germans had the facts. Their spies gathered them faithfully. From Mexico City dinners to Spanish embassy receptions, from Swedish engineers to Japanese officers, the evidence was undeniable. A bomber every hour. A workforce of tens of thousands. A river of aluminum and steel flowing endlessly into the skies. The reports were clear. But the leaders chose not to believe. Why? Because to believe meant admitting their entire worldview was wrong. That diversity wasn't weakness. That democracy wasn't chaos. That women, minorities, and even the disabled could outproduce the so-called master race. Can arrogance blind a nation so completely? Yes. And it cost them everything. By the time reality came crashing down, it was too late. Big Week had smashed their factories. D-Day had filled the skies with Allied aircraft. And Berlin itself had been pounded into dust by the very bombers they had dismissed as fantasy. When truth finally arrived, it arrived not as words on a report, but as fire from above. After the war, historians called it one of the greatest intelligence failures in history. But not because the information was wrong. Quite the opposite. It was right. Too right. The failure lay in the refusal to accept it. Isn't that the most haunting lesson of all? To ignore truth is to invite destruction. Think of the men who tried to tell the truth. Admiral Canaris. Hans Oster. Officers who read the numbers, who believed the reports, who tried to warn their leaders. Many of them paid with their lives. Executed in the final days of the war. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. And think of the workers at Willow Run. Women leaving kitchens and schools to rivet steel. African Americans breaking barriers with every shift. Teenagers managing supply chains. Disabled men and women proving that determination mattered more than prejudice. Every one of them punched in, did their job, and changed the world. Isn't it powerful to realize that history's greatest battles weren't just fought with guns, but with wrenches, drills, and sweat? By 1945, the verdict was clear. The United States had built 300,000 aircraft. Germany had built fewer than 100,000. Numbers don't lie. Math doesn't care about ideology. Truth always wins whether you believe it or not. And that's the warning history leaves us. Leaders who surround themselves with lies will be destroyed by truth. Nations that ignore reality will be crushed by those who embrace it. Willow Run built more than bombers. It built proof. Proof that freedom works. Proof that unity is strength. Proof that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, cannot be denied forever. So ask yourself, in our world today, do we still ignore truths that don't fit our beliefs? Do we still dismiss warnings because they challenge our ideology? If history teaches anything, it's this: reality doesn't bend. Those who deny it will pay the price. If you've stayed with me through this story, you've seen how a factory changed a war. You've seen how arrogance destroyed a regime. And you've seen how ordinary people working together made history. That's the kind of story we'll keep uncovering here, stories that reveal the hidden forces that shaped our world. So if this journey moved you, if you learned something new, take a moment now. Hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves history. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story, because there are countless more waiting, stories of courage, of mistakes, of lessons we can't afford to forget. History is more than the past. It's a warning. It's a guide. And sometimes, it's a mirror showing us who we are today. Don't look away from it. Learn from it. And carry its lessons forward. Because as Willow Run proved, truth ignored becomes tragedy, but truth embraced can change the world.